You're listening to the Empowering Process podcast with your host, Gail Kraft. Listen as she holds frank discussions around how your purpose, being present, and trusting your power impacts your life. Whether you're an entrepreneur, leader, or developing your vision, you'll find wisdom and insights you can utilize right now. Welcome your host, Gail Kraft.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Gail Kraft from the Empowering Process podcast. And yes, I look a little different because I'm tanned, I'm on the road, and, I'm basically in someone's bedroom. So I'm recording this. But I have the opportunity to meet with Kaitlyn Young, and I can't say no. So we have a young woman with us who is going to talk to us about what it's like to feel unworthy enough to try and take her own life more than once. Kaitlyn she's here with us. Oh, that's fantastic. She is an entrepreneur and she is the founder of an organization called the Social Media Doctor. And of course, it is what it sounds like. She definitely works with high-end entrepreneurs, helping them maximize results with their social media. So, meanwhile, Kaitlyn, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here and honored you asked me on.
It's going to be fantastic. So, the Empowering Process podcast is about the hard stories. And so, this is going to be a little bit of a difficult conversation. And when we talk about what it's like to feel like you don't belong, I've got lots of stories myself about feeling abandoned in my family. And it doesn't take much for a child whose brain and feeling of belonging is developing to latch on to a comment, a situation, and have that guide them for the rest of their lives. For me, it happened to be my mother passed away, kind of a big one, right? Um, but one that I didn't understand. And I just know that she left and never came back. And so not being worthy enough for my own mother to stay. And your feeling is very similar that your mother didn't care enough. So, Kaitlyn, let's start talking about your journey and how you traveled through some bad choices and yet came out the other side.
Absolutely. Like you said, it's very similar. I was about 7 years old, and I was staying at my cousin's house. They had a dog, and being, an animal lover I am, I went up to hug the dog like I had before. I've stayed at their house before, and the dog turned around and bit my eye. And I was bleeding, eyes swollen shut. I wanted my mom like any kid would, right? And instead of, my aunt calling my mom and, getting her there, she said that my mom was too busy for me. And at that point, I was like, wow, my mom's too busy to come for an emergency in my head. I didn't think about, well, maybe my aunt didn't call. I didn't go there because I was a kid. I just took it as my mom was too busy for me. And obviously, when I talked about later with my mom, that wasn't the case. But as a kid, it still stuck with me. And so, being one of 6 kids, I assumed that meant I was the lowest sibling on the totem pole. And I did whatever I could to people please my parents, to earn that trust, to earn that love that I didn't think was there. And it melded into me lying, it melded into me, doing whatever it could. I'd go out of my way to be the perfect kid so that way I could prove to my parents that I was worthy as well. I struggled with a couple of my siblings growing up, specifically my older brother. He wanted to help me because he saw that I was spiraling with eating a lot and stuff like that. But being in an environment, where you don't know how to portray things, he thought it would be a great idea to sit me down and go through my photo album and basically tell me how much uglier I got each year. And that transpired into me basically saying, oh my gosh, like he's right. I've just gotten worse, not better. And at this point, I had already been cutting because I was trying to release the pain that I didn't know how to release because I didn't have coping mechanisms or anything that I knew how to navigate those feelings. And I didn't feel worthy enough to bring them up to my parents, and I didn't trust myself enough to find help in that regard. So yeah, I went into my parents' bathroom, and was about to take a bottle of pills. And my little sister, who was like 4 or 5 at the time, walked in, and she was coming to get something, and I was like, oh crap, I can't do this. And that's the thing that stopped me the first time. So it's definitely
So, and at the first time, Kaitlyn, you were just 16 years old.
yes.
And so let's slow down a little bit,
Yeah.
because at this point in your life, you had gone 10 years of feeling unworthy, being the lowest on the totem pole. Therefore, your social skills with your siblings was not the best. There's anger, there's jealousy, there's, why not? Your self-deprecation, you were talking about cutting yourself, but you also started overeating at the time, and probably a whole bunch of other things. So talk to me about um, the struggle to feel better, what it
Yeah.
was like.
So I was homeschooled my whole life, so I didn't get a chance to get away from it either. So there were moments where my parents would fight, and my first response, because I was a giver, was to protect my siblings. And the way to do that was to take them out of the room, lie to them about what was going on, things like that. I coped by overgiving. I coped by, telling my mind, well, at least I protected them, at least they don't have to be like me. And that was what kind of filled in the hole for me and how I kind of coped with it. I didn't really deal with the feelings because that was not normal in our household. Feelings were a no-go zone. We said we loved each other. There was a lot of good moments, but when it came to the bad side, we had to look like the perfect little Catholic family that had their life together.
I love it. The perfect family. Yes. Leave it to Beaver syndrome, right? With the picket fence and everything is perfect. So, so you were homeschooled, so you didn't even get to socialize outside of the environment where you felt worthless, right?
Yeah. Before we moved when I was 10 to a little town called Lake Odessa, we had a good homeschool group where I had friends. But after we moved to Lake Odessa, my best friend was a llama. She was the one I would go to. She wouldn't judge me. She's the one that would let me vent. That was like my healthy coping mechanism. Is I would sit there. She'd put her head on my shoulder and do a soft hum because she could sense I was upset, and I would just stroke her. And that was the most healthiest part of my coping, is I had her.
So, so then you finish schooling, and something triggered you again at the age of 22. What was it that triggered you to once again try to take your life?
So it was a culmination of things. I kind of had it in my mind that I was not going to live past 22. When you tell your mind that, it's automatically going to look for ways to end, because you're telling your mind that is just how it's going to go. At one point I had a boyfriend just so that way my parents thought I was okay. As soon as I turned 18, I started paying for my phone, everything. So that way, when I ended my life, they wouldn't have to worry about any debt, anything like that. I started putting money away side. I started buying my siblings expensive gifts here and there, doing things so that way when it ended, in my mind, there wouldn't be anything for them to worry about. Because in my mind, they weren't going to miss me, even though that's obviously not true. I got married. The part that stopped all that is I met Scott, my husband, when I was 20, and he was everything that I didn't know I needed. He had a strong faith in God, and then also he saw my flaws and still loved me for it. And he would walk with me side by side through each situation. Around my 22nd birthday, though, because I had told myself this lie for so long, I started to feed back into the thought of, well, he is such an amazing man. I obviously don't deserve him. He deserves a better wife, and if I end this now, then he can have time to find one before he gets too old. It'll all be okay, you know? And so I basically went out to see Avengers Endgame, movie that my whole family wanted to see. And that was my goodbye to them, whether they realized it or not. My mom knew something was up. She's like, what's going on? Something's wrong. And of course, I just was like, oh, no, I'm fine. You know, I was ecstatic because I was excited to be done. And I didn't realize that was what was happening, but I was ready to be done with the pain because I had not dealt with any of it. And my husband was getting ready for work the day that I decided I was going to do it. I wrote the notes, wrote everything, and he saw that I was grinning too much. Like, I was just so excited, and it was out of character excited. It was like almost psycho excited. And he's like, he sat me down and just held me. He's like, what's going on? And that's when my dam burst. I told him, you know, everything, and he helped me get into a place called Pine Rest, which was a psychological facility for mental illnesses. And I went in there for 6 weeks on and off. It wasn't until week 6 when I realized that I was still here for a reason. I had a kind of come to Jesus moment, God moment, whatever you want to call it, where I realized that if I was not supposed to be here and if I did not have a purpose, I wouldn't be here. There's a reason that I was alive, and it was time to find what that was.
And so that was at 22.
Yes.
And so what are some of the steps that you took to assure that these thoughts no longer came into your life, so that you started to make positive choices, started feeling worthy versus unworthy, stopped being a doormat? What are the steps that you took to do that before you actually became the amazing person that I know?
Yeah, so the first thing, which was something they taught us in Pine Rest, was, you know, affirmations, self-talk. So I decided to create a room. We had a walk-in closet, so I took everything out of there, and I made it a sensory room. So I had a fish tank with bubbles. I had a mat where I could feel and ground myself. I had a seat, some stress balls, and then I had cards that I put affirmations on each day. So for the first 15 minutes of my day, I would go into that room and I would meditate and get centered, and then I would write 3 things that I found positive about myself. I would laugh during it because that's how much I didn't like myself. I would be like laughing, like, this is ridiculous, this is a joke. Like, I just was like laughing during it. But over time, I got more confident with it, and then I moved it to the bathroom mirror where everyone could see. And so, and that way, when I went to the bathroom, I'd have to look at it, say it to myself. And after about 90 days of that, I noticed I started to like myself again. And I had quit my job around that time and went to Walmart. And that way I could focus on my mental health and I wouldn't have to really think about the job. And so that turned into me just taking a year of reading different mindset books, reading, you know, articles, podcasts, a a lot of different meditation apps. I used Headspace a lot. And doing that inner work, I started to do the outer work as well. At that point, I was 350 pounds as well. I went and got gastric sleeve surgery, lost 120, gained some of that back since. We're back on that journey now. But, I took the steps to go in the right direction, and it just kind of blossomed from there. It all really came back to affirmations and self-talk. The way we talk to ourselves and the way we think really does affect what happens on the outside as well.
Well, we are interconnected. We are not an island. No man is an island. That's a fact. We are mind, body, and soul, and as within, so without. It's so true. It's also true. So, so I'm curious, Kaitlyn, why you did not find yourself a coach to help you through this, because most people that I talk with don't do a journey of this nature alone.
I didn't know about coaches at that time. I did a little bit of therapy, but the therapist I had was kind of self-deprecating, was kind of keeping me in a victim mindset instead of moving me into an empowering mindset. So a lot of it was me talking to my husband and me having conversations with myself for the longest time, just really working through the inspirational podcasts and learning from those different speakers. And then when I left Walmart almost 2 years ago and went into a more entrepreneur field of health insurance, that's when I realized that there are coaches and all these. And I was like, oh, this would have helped.
And so do you have a coach now?
Yes, I have a
Okay.
couple coaches.
Right. Right. And I love that you said you have a couple of coaches. I've never had just one coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because each has a certain perspective. Now, as a coach, I've worked with clients who have had shrinks who've gone to, we're seeing psychologists or psychiatrists at the same time that they were seeing me, because my approach is so completely different. And they would clear it with, their counselor, like, all right, so my coach wants me to do blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's okay. All right, cool.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, exactly. And I still see a psychologist. That's because I was diagnosed with something called borderline personality disorder. So I am on one medication for that still, but that's just something that I work through and am mindful of daily, and I don't use it as a crutch. I use it as a way to think. So I know my mind works a certain way, and so I can stop and pause before, I realize I'm going to say something and go, okay, is that my ego talking or is that me talking? I'm able to, knowing how my brain works, I'm able to respond better.
Now, if that's the interesting, is that my ego talking or is that me talking? Right. I do a lot of that myself and have gotten to I mean, when you start doing that process, it's almost like instantaneous. You're like, "Do, do, 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 do." Okay. Right. But at
Mhm.
first you're like, okay, so I'm feeling this, is that, and how can you tell that it's ego? So I have some ideas about that, but when you ask yourself, is that my ego talking or is that me talking? Why don't you share with the audience what you do to find to discern the difference?
Yeah, so for me, I know it's my ego when it's usually something I've manifested or something like that. And it's, telling me like, oh, well, just because you've manifested this doesn't mean you deserve it, like it's that fear of, I'm not good enough or, trying to protect me because the ego, all it's doing is trying to protect us from the unknown. And so being able to say, hey, sis, I got you, It's okay. We're going to make it through this. That's something I've done a lot more recently, is kind of have these literal dialogues with my inner child and just kind of be like, hey, okay, I get we're stressed out about this, but we're going to be fine. It's new. Yes, but new is good, because it's natural for us to get uncomfortable about something new. So that's usually when I know it's my ego, when it's something new or something that's a trigger that we've seen before, something that hurt us before. We'll be like, oh no, we can't do that. But in reality, it's nothing like what it was before.
Yeah, I wrote down like the three things that are definite ego choices for me. If I'm doing judgment or fear judgment, right? So if judgment is in the picture at all, it's ego. And I say, thank you very much, ego, but you can go away now.
Yep.
Right. If it's blame, right? Taking blame or giving blame. Okay, thank you very much, ego. It's time for you to go now. Right. And then the other is this a story that I'm telling myself and am I making this up?
Yep.
And then it's like, this is a story, be in the moment, what is really going on in this moment, and don't fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Right.
That 100% has been something that I've had to be super mindful of, because that was a coping mechanism for me growing up, is, to make my parents like me, I'd come up with a story, or to protect my siblings, I'd come up with a story. So my brain would automatically, create these fantasies or, stories that I got to a point before I got like help and started working on me, where I didn't know what my reality was. And that was scary. Since then, I've done a lot of work. And I mean, do I get perfect every time? Absolutely not. But I've definitely became super mindful of asking myself that question before I speak.
Right, right. So it's the process, right? And what's interesting and let me know if this happens with you. So I'll go through that process, and I'll go through that process if I'm in a dialogue with someone else about them. And it's like, so are they responding to what's going on right now? Or are they making up a story? Or are they like reacting to something that happened 3 months ago? Right? Right? Or 3 years ago? Or a century ago? Right?
Yes,
Right?
yes.
Right.
It's
And what does that got to do with this mo? And I go through that, and then I think to myself, well, I can't help them if they're gonna go, into history. This is not what's going on right now. And I'm not responding. And I don't respond
yeah,
because it's you're not going to tell someone, you're arguing with me about something that, happened 6 months ago, and they think it's something that happened just now, right?
exactly. That's something that I had to kind of create boundaries with certain people, because they would keep bringing up stuff that happened 10, 15 years ago. And you can only repair a relationship to a certain point, and then someone has to meet you halfway, right? They have to meet you, or you have to let it go. And so that was something I learned last year, was there's certain people that won't get to that point when you do, and you have to just let it go and let them get to that place in their own time, or if they don't get there. uh,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
And then be very clear about, so I'm going to use an insurance term, what is in your care, custody, and control,
yep,
right? If it's not within your care, custody, and control, and that means you, then it's none of your business,
exactly,
right? It's none of your business what they think, what they feel, or what's going on in their mind,
exactly.
right? Right. And that's a very hard for people to do, especially people like you and me who want to be people pleasers because of feeling unworthy. You go the extra mile to prove your worth. I mean, I succeeded in business because I busted my butt. Why? To be better than the next one. Why? Because I got approval. That validates me, right? Looking externally for that validation, right? And learning to love yourself and validate yourself. If I get a compliment, that's great. Thank you very much, but I'm not looking for it.
Exactly. And that takes a lot to shift. But once you get there from consistently talking to yourself in a different perspective, it definitely is worth it. I still struggle with it every day. There's still moments where I'm like, I do not want to get out of bed because, life sucks, but I do it anyway because I know that consistent action will get me to where I need to go.
Right, right, right. So for, anyone who is listening who has been in this situation or is in this situation or knows someone in this situation of, you know, harming themselves. And, cutting is I wouldn't say step one. Overeating is probably step one of bringing yourself, not loving yourself. The first sign of that.
Mm-hmm.
Cutting yourself is a complete scream for attention, complete scream for help. And when that's not addressed, and suicide is throwing in the towel.
Yeah.
It's like, I've given you all the hints I can, and obviously you don't want me here, so why am I here?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, like with those people, I honestly, as hard as it is, talk to someone. I don't care who it is. Literally, there's completely anonymous helplines that you could literally talk to, but talk to someone about what you're feeling that will be able to be like, hey, I see you.
Right.
Talk to someone that is going to see you, because I think the biggest reason someone goes down that rabbit hole is they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard, and they're just stuck in a mindset of, you know, if no one sees the scars on me, if no one sees this, if no one sees that, obviously I'm not worth it. And so get through that first hurdle by talking to someone, and then you can start working on how you talk to yourself. But when you're in that moment of crisis, you do need someone else to pull you out. At least in my experience, if Scott had not pulled me out, I wouldn't be here.
And what's interesting, first of all, the self-talk and the process of, what do I own, what do I not own, is forever, right? But it gets to the point where, for me, it's natural. I don't struggle, Kaitlyn. I love my life. I look forward to waking up. I look forward to starting my day. I look forward to the moment that I'm in. So I'm not looking forward to the future, to the moment that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, it wasn't always that way. And it becomes natural if you're willing to work at it, because that is who we are when we talk about the core, right? We're here, guys, no big deal. It's not a huge, mind blower. We're here to play.
Yeah.
We're here to have fun. We're here to experience. So I'm writing another book, by the way, and I have a chapter that is completely about how do you play the game of life? How do you play the game? What is the game?
Yeah.
Right? Guys, wait till you, it's going to blow your mind. Right?
Good.
Because when you know how to play the game, it is so much fun. It is
Yeah.
so much fun. And we are raised taking with fear and things too serious. Like all of these rules, guys, are made up stories. You're not going to go to hell. There isn't a hell. No, you're not going to be punished. Now, do you want to be ergonomic, which means you honor nature, you honor yourself, and you honor others? Yes. Yes. Do no harm. But other than that, that is the only law. Other than that, go have fun, right? So, Kaitlyn, tell us a little bit about how people can get in touch with you. What is it that you do in supporting entrepreneurs? I know that you do a great job supporting the group that we're in. So share some of that information with us and how people can get in touch with you.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I'm the social media doctor. So, what I do is I help people represent themselves authentically online. So, my goal is not to just, put your stuff up and hope it works. My goal is to make you shine as the authentic person you are or company that you own, show your core values, your mission statements, everything that makes you different and unique in you. So that is what I do. So that to grow your brand. And then people can get in touch with me on any social media. I live on social media. It's just kind of where I live. But it's Kaitlin Young, Kaitlin Young Official, variations of Kaitlin Young on the platforms. And, I'm always available for a talk or to, go over some things. I always have time to help a fellow man or woman out. So definitely reach me there. And, I also have a podcast that I just started. Gail was my first guest. So we have that going too. And you can find that on any of my pages.
And so all of her links and so forth will be in the comments for sure to share with everybody. And, Kaitlyn, I know that this was your first time you shared your story like this. So thank you very much. I'm honored that you felt safe enough to open up and share on the Empowering Process podcast. And guys, again, this is Gail Kraft from the Empowering Process podcast. If this resonated with you, let us know. If you know somebody that could benefit from this kind of conversation, share it out with them. And always subscribe so you know when new episodes come up. We would love to hear from you. So if you have something that came up because of this or a question, put it in the comments. We will get back to you on it and maybe even hold another podcast answering some of those questions. And again, Gail Kraft, Kaitlin Young. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Kaitlyn.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Empowering Process podcast. Be sure to visit Gail at gailcraft.com to learn more about how she serves thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and goal seekers. And remember, if you like this broadcast, be sure to share and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.